Here. So I'm Dan Russell, and I'm the search quality user happiness Uber tech lead. What that means, if I unpack that a little bit, is at Google, we're very, very interested in making sure that you have the best possible search experience, that everything goes smoothly, your experience is good, you get high quality results. And my job is to be a user experience researcher. That is, somebody who goes out and understands how people search, why they're searching, and how we can improve that overall experience. So I spend a lot of time in the field watching people basically doing, think of it as search anthropology. What is it you're using when you use Google? How are you thinking about it? And what can we do to improve the edge of that tool for you? And a big part of my work for the past, I'd say 2 years now, has been going off and teaching people how to be better searchers. So I teach, for example, I'm teaching tonight here in the public library nearby. But I also teach classes for librarians on how to be better searchers. I teach, this is the most striking thing, is I teach classes inside of Google how to search using Google. And the really surprising one is I actually teach a class on advanced search techniques for Google search engineers. Sure. It's, well, to give you the simplest possible definition, it's everything. But what I mean really is it's everything, we consider everything from the moment you start up the application or you take something out of the box and first start to use it. So for example, Apple is famous for its out-of-the-box experience. So for them, user experience starts the moment you buy it, the moment you take it home. For us at Google, user experience starts the moment you launch the Chrome web browser or the moment you go to the Google homepage. So it's everything you see, everything you think about, everything you do in order to get your job done. So for us, it's really how do you get started, how do you keep things going, and how do you finally successfully complete the task. Let's think about it. When you start to do a Google search, the first thing you do is usually open up a web browser. More sophisticated people sometimes use the tool, if you've got a toolbar in the upper right corner. People who are on Chrome, of course, just go to the address bar. But each of those is a very different experience, right? So we start with how do you get into Google search. So we think about, for example, on Chrome, a lot of people we find just don't know where the search box is. So they go to www.google.com even though the one bar allows you to actually do a search there. So they're not using the capability of the tool to start with. So that's one thing we start to think about. We then think about, well, when you actually do the search and you get the results back, how do you understand those results? What do you think about those results? So for example, one of the things we know is that a lot of people get very panicked by seeing 20 million results at the top of the page. And I've had people say, what am I going to do with 20 million results? Do I have to look at all of them? No. Relax. So a part of what I do is just personal counseling. And I'm trying to get people to understand that when they see a result on the page, what they're actually doing is they're looking at the rank ordered list of the best results that we can find, and we're putting them in an order that we think is going to be helpful to you. So a large part of the user experience of search is explaining to people both what they can say, what they can type, how to speak Google-ish, and as well as looking at what comes back and how to interpret that. So I'll give you another example. One thing we see a lot of is people over-interpret. Let me say it another way. They actually underread the search results. So you have a single result, and at the very top is the blue title link with a link to the landing page. Below that in black is the snippet or the abstract of that page. And below that in green is the URL, and there's other stuff maybe. But what happens is that the more sophisticated users will actually also look at the green URL and say, oh, that's at nationalgeographic.com. Now I see who owns this page and who wrote it, in effect. Less sophisticated people won't even see that. The other thing we see is, for example, the snippet, the text that is sort of the summary of the page, is automatically generated by some algorithm in the sky. So what we do actually is if you give the search terms X, Y, and Z, we look inside the text of the landing page to find text in that document that's near or around the search terms that you gave. So every search may generate a different snippet. Why is that important? Well, one of the things it means is that for example, when we generate the ellipsis, the dot 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 that's in the middle of the snippet, you have to be careful. You have to be careful when you see that to not read it as though a human wrote the dot dot dot. So when you write a document, when you're writing a message to me, you might say, well, and then we dot 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 carried on. Now, the implicit assumption is when you wrote dot dot dot, you didn't leave out any of the good stuff, right? But the algorithm doesn't know the semantics, the deep semantics of that document. So what it's doing is it's finding little fragments and sticking them all together, which means that dot 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 actually could be leaving out semantically significant text. So as a good user, as a good searcher, one of the things you have to know is how to actually look at the search results page. So that's a big aspect. We actually, I mean, to your point, we actually are doing this constantly. You probably know that one of the things Google does a lot of is experimentation with both the ranking algorithms and a lot with the user interface. So I was just checking a few moments ago, and we've got, I don't know, a couple hundred roughly experiments, UI experiments running right now. So we go to a lot of trouble actually we have so many experiments running, we go to a lot of trouble to make sure they're not interacting with each other. We don't want one experiment saying, oh, the underlying text is this shade of blue, and another one saying, oh, it's that shade of blue, because we go to a lot of trouble to make sure they don't interact. The point is, we're constantly changing. One of the examples I'll give you is a couple of years ago, we were trying to figure out how to change the user interface to incorporate different kinds of results from different corpora. What I mean by that is now if you do a search for, say, Japan, you would be very likely to see a blended, what we call a blended result. That is something from news or images or video, right? People don't remember not so long ago that wasn't there. There was no blending. You actually had to go to news in order to read news. You had to go to images. But now we've smartened up the algorithm to insert those things. And we went to a lot of trouble at the time to figure out the best way to visually merge those results. Here's the good news. The good news is we figured out a way so it became immediately apparent what it was, and nobody had to learn anything particularly new. So we are constantly tweaking things. We do things with leading, we do things with font choice, with colors, with layout, with inclusion of new material. We're doing this all the time in order to make the experience better. We actually take a kind of really pragmatic approach. We'll do whatever it takes, you know, in order to get to the sort of really useful information. But I broadly think of my work as coming in three categories. And the categories come sort of, they're linked to specific time domains, you know, specific amounts of performance behaviors. So you can think of it as sort of millisecond by millisecond behavior. That's what we do when we're doing eye tracking studies. Or second by second behavior is when we bring people into our lab, into our usability lab, and watch them use our tools or our new prototypes or our new mock-ups or something. So in that case, we're looking from milliseconds to seconds. Then I'll go out in the field, or I'll have, you know, somebody who works with me go out in the field, and we'll watch people minute by minute, hour by hour, as they actually use the system at home. So for example, one of the things we learned from that is sometimes people will do a search, they will click on the news tab, and then they will read their news, and then they'll do another search, forgetting that they're in news. Okay? So this is called stuck in a mode. Happens a lot. Happens a lot. And so it's one of the things we've identified, and we've been trying to figure out how to improve that experience. So then at the third or fourth level, whatever we're at now, we also look in the millions of user events. When we're looking at logs, when we're doing logs analysis, we're looking at millions and millions and millions of people clicking, choosing, selecting what to do, how to change their query, and so on. So that is over the course of days, weeks, months. So we span from milliseconds to months, and we try to use whatever methods actually are most appropriate for that analysis. Exactly. So that's an important point. We actually believe strongly that there's value to be gained from both of these perspectives, in fact, from all these different methods. So for example, I've discovered things by doing logs analysis that I would go out in the field and validate in the field and say, wow, who knew, but this is really happening, right? And it's worked the other way around. Give you a great example of this. I was doing a study a while ago about how people used our advanced search UI. So you know when you click on the advanced button, you get all the new options. So we've got that. And I was out in the field, I was watching people use it, and mostly people would look at it and go, huh? Oh, okay. If you would talk to a librarian, he or she would say, yeah, I know this, I got this cold. But then I saw a couple people who had obviously never seen it before. They clicked through to the page, and I remember one, I was interviewing a woman here not far from Mountain View. It was a hot August night, and she literally shrieked. She said, "What is that?" And she hit back. Okay? So what happens is in that case, that was really a striking finding. So the next day I came into work, and I thought, gee, I should be able to find some evidence for this in logs. If this is happening, it's such a striking experience for this person. I should find some evidence in logs. So I did the obvious logs analysis and discovered that the bounce rate for the advanced search page was around 80%. Now, 80% is really high. Now, just to calibrate it, 35, 45%, that's actually pretty good. Typical website will have a bounce rate around 50% or so. But 85, no. Yep, exactly. And mostly we know they didn't come back. They had such a bad experience, and this is terrible. So we started up a UI redesign effort, and we took, I guess it was about 2 months, and it made a lot of different iterations. We did a lot of live traffic testing. We did a lot of usability lab testing, and we came up with a new design. Here's what the good news was. So we ran it. We got to a design we liked. We started running the logs analysis on live traffic, and we discovered the bounce rate dropped to 40%. So I'll tell you what the major change in the UI was. It was actually taking the things that were really scary, like the copyright legal requirements and date range specifiers and all that stuff, and putting it in a zippy so that if you wanted that stuff, you could zip it and get more options. But when you landed on the page, it wasn't a frightening page. You know what I mean? Yeah, well, you know, you can't tell a book by its cover. Well, I'll tell you, a lot of people reject books because of their cover. And that's what's happening. We know from other work that the first 100 milliseconds of perception of a web page determines a lot of your response to that page, a lot of your affective response. So we needed to fix the first 100 milliseconds. We've got a lot of capability there, and right now one of the things I know is that most people don't know the range of things that are possible. And so we're trying very hard to figure out how can we make more of this discoverable, visible, understandable,